and it is coming up on the weekend, so do sort of cruise into that weekend. But heavyweight action, a lot of topics, a lot of news floating around at the moment. Not necessarily all big, but, you know, there is a lot of things going on at the moment. This weekend, a little bit sort of barren in terms of the bigger name fighters, or actually, I mean, in general, we've only had a smattering of heavyweights sort of back so far. So it's going to be good to sort of see things get back into the swing of things, which things look like they're sort of slowly getting back to some version of a sort of schedule. But, you know, some of the bigger name fighters yet to dip their toe back in. A number of topics that I wanted to cover off. Sort of chat is still yet to load yet, but so I haven't seen anyone in the building. I know that it is live, but it always just takes a little bit sort of, you know, a minute or so delay before things fully kick in. Wanted to talk about Andy Ruiz and this choice of Manuel Charr or Chris Arreola. Charr making a strong play, and obviously a little bit of leverage there, you know, a little bit of a trinket to sort of dangle out there. FA jug, but change trainers and also promotional outfits. Otto Wallin, his fight is coming up with Travis Kaufman in another week or so. Kuzman is out because his father is sick. So what's happening with that card? That Dillian White headlined event with Alexander Povetkin, still just a couple of weeks out and things are not set. And also a number of other topics as we go along. Okay, so we do have someone in the chat now. So we've got David, Hey Boxing Squared, and Solid Midpacker says, yo. So hello to both of you. So 9 in the building right now, so we're just sort of warming things up, but we'll crack straight into some of the topics. Marcus, he's in the building. Andy Ruiz Jr. It looked for all money that there was going to be a fight with him and Chris Arreola. I'm just looking at the chat here. Sorry, it distracted me. I'll come to that in a moment, back to the chat. But it looked like it was going to be Arreola. Then Manuel Charr's been making this play publicly and says that his promoter is going to be meeting with PBC. So that doesn't necessarily mean that that fight is going to happen or even happen next. It could in fact be a case of sort of been thinking about this. Maybe the Arreola fight does happen. Remember, the WBA has ranked Arreola out of nowhere. That was a couple of months ago. So I think what will happen, it will be an eliminator perhaps, that fight, Ruiz and Arreola, should it be confirmed, and probably for Charr's belt. So I could totally see Ruiz ending up facing Manuel Charr at some point. But maybe Charr has done enough to push his way to the sort of front now. Perhaps we'll just have to see. I mean, I sort of think that the reason there's been a delay in announcing his next fight is like a lot of these other guys who are fighting on Fox at the moment. They haven't announced their broader schedule, and that seemingly is going to be incoming. But I'd like to get your thoughts on that. Who do you want to see Ruiz fight out of those two? I know it's not ideal, and I'd rather not see either of those fights if I had my choice. I'd rather like to see Ruiz facing someone who's a bit more relevant in the division. And sure, there's a little bit of divisional relevancy with that WBA strap, but, you know, it's Manuel Charr. He's been inactive for 3 years and basically been parading around like he's an elite heavyweight. He was never much chop to begin with. Chris Arreola, he'll, give it a firm effort, but he's not going to win that fight. It's like the Kovnarski fight. He put in a good effort, but ultimately it was a pretty conclusive, solid win to Kovnarski that night in a fun fight. So getting back to the chat here, David says, who do you think Dave Allen will fight and Bacoli? Well, we'll come to that a little bit later on because that's one of the topics I wanted to briefly touch on. Lee Craft says, what's good boxing, Squared? Hello to you too. Vader says, what's up, Squared? Do you know anything about a Pena versus Coffey fight? It looks fun, like a Mark Hunt, Bob Sapp type thing. We'll come to that a little bit later as well because I wanted to just quickly whip through the schedule in a bit. I was going to discuss Michael Polite Coffey. He's a guy who's been in Deontay Wilder's training camps a number of times. I don't actually know much about Pena, so it'll be interesting to see, is that one actually going to be on the broadcast? Because it's, it hasn't really got much of a promotional push for this card, which is headed by Thomas Delorme and Jamal James. So I'll come to that a little bit later on. So the Body Snatcher is in the house. Random person says, hello man, how are you doing? I'm doing good. I actually just got back from a walk. Sort of, it's a winter here, so it was a little bit brisk. And actually, a guy who's in the chat there, UK Rob Boxing, who says hello. Hope you're good, everyone. I was actually listening to Mixed Combat Radio. He's one of the co-hosts on that, so they had a stream that came out earlier today. And yeah, I did actually flick Rob a couple of messages by DM, some of the trash talk that one of the other co-hosts was flinging his way. Body Snatcher says, do you think the WBC announcement versus White v winner, will it be AJ or White or franchise? See, the thing is, though, with that, it's a regurgitation. I mean, and this is what's been happening a lot, and it's, with Sky in particular, some of these stories that they come out with, they're rehashing and regurgitating old news, reheating it. Mauricio Suleiman already came out like a number of weeks ago and said that Dillian Whyte was next. So there was no sort of, grey area with it. He said there would be no going straight to undisputed. It was going to be Dillian Whyte next. He would face, the winner of Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder 3. So, yeah, I mean, some of this sort of stuff that's been going on in recent months, particularly as media organizations have struggled for content, some of it's been a bit fast and loose. So I'm talking a little bit about that on my Patreon this weekend, but also sort of combining that with another issue that I've been seeing sort of prevalent as there's been sort of less boxing on at this time. Idle hands leading to a bit more of a toxic culture, I think, in terms of the sport. Your Dennis says, will Top Rank groom a Agaba as the next heavyweight star boxing squared? Well, I think, they've got a number of prospects in their stable. Guys like Sonny Conto, Jared Anderson, Guido Vianello, Tony Yoka's just recently joined as well. I mean, they will bring these guys along. Not all of them are going to make it as stars. Some of them will not pan out, but others, I think there's one or two in there that probably will end up having a very good career. So they're hoping for the best for Agaba. A lot of raw potential. He's a work in progress. I mean, we'll talk about that in a moment too. A little bit sort of sour with him and Ronnie Shields in the split. Phyllis82 says we want Charlie Zelenoff. Maybe we don't. I'm not so sure about that comment. Adam says, hope everyone's well. David Hemming said, would you like Parker versus David Price fight in New Zealand? That's probably one of the better names that I've heard attached to Joseph Parker in recent weeks. I mean, really, it's gone very quiet. They haven't been able to sort of land Lucas Brown, Dempsey McKean, or Junior Farr, the three names that they threw out there. David Higgins had sort of spoken about potentially guys like Dillian Whyte or Derek Chisora, getting them to New Zealand. Other heavyweights that he'd like, from the UK. But yeah, I don't think those names were realistic, and he knows that too. But yeah, David Price that's interesting. I think you could certainly, given, it's a bit slim in terms of the packings right now, you might be able to make that work. But yeah, I'm not so sure that David Price, I mean, he'd have to be getting paid. Remembering Price is at the sort of end of his career now. He's wanting to maximize what he's making. They'd have to make it worth his while. And, getting him to New Zealand, I just don't see Duco fronting up the sort of money that Price would want. Remembering, you're working against the exchange rate too. So New Zealand's dollar much weaker than the pound. So, whatever you're giving him in New Zealand dollars, immediately it's sort of getting halved or a third or whatever it is at the moment. It's definitely, it's not that strong. Solid Midpacker says, no way that guy is like 400. No chance for Ruiz. He even flattened Wilder. It's interesting, Charlie Zelenoff, because there's a Twitter account and he follows, a lot of, accounts on Twitter. He followed me. I followed him back and all that sort of stuff. And for months, I couldn't work out, was it like a troll account in terms of, was it the guy or was it actually someone who was just, running a bit of a game and that sort of stuff. I'm not really, I'm leaning towards it is his real account, but I'm still not quite sure. Joe DC says, big up Boxing Squared, looking forward to fight camp tonight. Yeah, I actually, because normally the fights are on Sunday my time, Sunday morning. And there was the weigh-in today, and I didn't even think about it. So it'll be Saturday morning my time, which is that card must be starting in about 9 hours or so, or something like that. Got to say, it's not looking like the strongest card. So If I end up sleeping through part of it, maybe I'm not going to really sort of be too bothered about it. But, I'll sort of say, it'd be interesting to see Anthony Fowler. The guy's a walking meme. Lawrence William is in the house. He says, what's good? He was the one that alerted me to the Pena and Michael Polite Coffee fight, which for some reason, that card, it wasn't listed on BoxRec. I'm interested to know that with that fight, and we might as well talk about it now. Someone just recently mentioned it. So both these guys are unbeaten. Coffee 9-0, Pena, I believe he's 6-0. Actually, I'll just flick back to his record. Yeah, I brought it up on screen earlier. Yeah, 6-0. But when I dug into it, the guy's basically been fighting novices, guys with 1 or 2 fights, that sort of thing. So Coffee, I'd imagine, is probably going to win this fight. I never seen Pena, so I got nothing to go on. But Michael Polite Coffee, he's got some good power. He's been in Deontay Wilder's camps a number of times. He's mid-30s now, so maybe his run has sort of been left a bit late. But, he's got decent potential, good power, but maybe he's not going to sort of pan out at that sort of top 20 level. It's sort of, he might have just left his run a little bit late on that front. But yeah, if opportunity knocks and he takes it and starts getting a few wins, maybe he could sort of start getting into the sort of top 30 conversation and some fights around that level. I think he's definitely got a bit of talent. In terms of getting back to the chat here, where were we? Okay, so Mysterious Stranger says hello. Salty Sally says hello. God of War says what's up. Hello to one and all. 34 in the building at the moment. Wherever you are in the world, morning, noon or night, hope you are having a good one. It's 10:25 p.m. here at night, so I just got back from a walk maybe half an hour or so ago. I was looking to do the live in the morning, but then I actually realized when I was out on my walk, actually that fight camp card would be on in the morning my time. So I thought, well, I've still got a bit of energy after the walk, so I might as well get into it. Yordena says, love your work as always. Thank you for the compliment there. Salty Sally says, David Price versus Bacoli. So we might as well get to that card. I had got that on my list to cover off here. So we've covered off Andy Ruiz and Manuel Char and Chris Arreola. That's sort of, who's going to be the guy. In terms of that card with Kuzman being out, Martin Bacoli, opponent TBA. Alan Babich was added to the card a couple of weeks ago, opponent TBA. And then talk that maybe Dave Allen is going to be on the card, and even mention of Fabio Wardley. So it's not looking, one domino falls and then all of a sudden the card starts to look a little bit shakier, and the quality certainly dips with that Bacoli and Kuzman fight not happening now. And there, Dillian White this week mentioned he would like to have, if he could, at a push, get Fabio Wardley on that card, facing a guy like Nick Webb. And that's a name that was certainly coming up in the comment section of my post-fight review the other day. I think a lot of people think that fight makes a lot of sense right now. Wardley fighting guys around that level for a few fights, then moving on to maybe British level or something like that. Dave Allen, it sort of seems to be, and I'm not sure Eddie Hearn is sort of reading the room on that score. Everything I've seem to have read for the most part and seen around the places, people aren't that keen to see Dave Allen given another opportunity. And the guy himself has sort of said, he wants to make a good go of it. But then, if he's really going to be taking things seriously, as he says he is, and he has been training a lot harder more recently, judging by his transformation on, that he's posted on social media. But if he's taking it as seriously as he says, why would he consider being dumped in at 2 weeks' notice? Most likely to be a punching bag for someone. Who he would be fighting, it's unclear. But someone mentioning David Price there for Martin Bacoli. I think Martin Bacoli would probably steamroll David Price at this point. I think Price is looking for those right fights, those right opportunities. I don't think that he's going to take that unless it was like getting way overpaid. And I imagine that Bacoli and Kuzman, their cuts were at a certain level, and Price, because of the name value, and if he's coming in to help prop up the show, probably asking for more than they're willing to sort of pay him. So UK Boxing Rob says Fowler slander. Yeah, and Anthony Fowler, the guy cracks me up on social media. He must be the most sensitive sausage on there. Vader D says he would like to see Oscar Rivas versus Parker. Yeah, I like that fight, but thing is, at the moment, Oscar Rivas has just joined on with Top Rank on a co-promotional deal. Parker has still got a deal left on his DAZN and Matchroom contract. But in the meantime, they're looking to have a fight in New Zealand outside of that deal. So he's probably going to be fighting a guy. This is Parker. They'll bring someone in who's got a padded record. They'll try to sort of sell it to the local marketers. This is a good test for Parker. And Higgins has already sort of laid the groundwork with anyone can, any heavyweight can knock out another heavyweight. So that doesn't instill me with a lot of confidence that, the opponent, when they find one, is going to be that good. McCracken says fighting price is a massive downgrade for Parker. Pretty depressing if that's where Parker's career has ended up. I actually think the opponent probably, once they land something, may even be less than that. Vader says Frank Sanchez versus Parker. Frank Sanchez, I don't know his exact promotional status. He's appeared on some PBC cards, but I'd like that fight. I mean, Frank Sanchez has actually called out Joseph Parker before, says he would like to take that fight. Michael Hunter's called out Joseph Parker. There's a number of guys that would like to face Joseph Parker, and I'm sure Parker himself would take some of these fights. But management and remembering sort of divisional sort of politics, he's number 2 in the WBO, or 3, or whatever it is at the moment in the WBO. I don't think that his manager, David Higgins / advisor, is willing to put him into a fight where there's some risk. And Sanchez is a guy that can move well, has got good speed. Maybe he's, in terms of a straight out boxing shootout with Parker, maybe he would have the edge in terms of the technical ability. He's actually a pretty decent up-and-coming fighter, Frank Sanchez. I wouldn't see that one ending in a knockout or anything. I think that would end up going to points. So Faluso82 says, I see this outcome based on WBC's announcement. Next fight provider Fury and AJ winning their next fights. They both vacate WBO and WBC. Usyk versus Povetkin White unification. Well, there's so many permutations, but if Joshua's still got the WBO, I can't see them looking to vacate. That just, everything that's happened in Joshua's career, nothing would indicate to me that he's willing to give up a belt. He may get stripped of one depending on, say whoever gets undisputed. Because I could see at the point that someone becomes undisputed, remembering it could end up holding up mandatories if they have 2 fights. So for the second fight, maybe one of the belts does go west. We'll have to see. It's almost not worth talking about some of the permutations, and because it's going to be so far out. They've still got to get past their next couple of opponents before Fury and Joshua get to meet them in the ring if they keep winning. No guarantees. It is boxing after all. Adam Fahey says Joseph's next fight will be a top 15 W opponent for sure, because there's a chance at a WBO title fight against Usyk if AJ drops that belt to fight Fury next year. I guess it's the willingness of David Higgins, if they're having that fight in New Zealand outside of Parker's Matchroom deal. Are they going to stump up the money? Because even though, it could be, in some sense, in different parts of the world, be seen as a sort of buyer's market, you might be able to get some fighters, on the cheap to an extent. Because obviously there's been no fights. Some of these guys that haven't had big money in their careers, they may not necessarily be that sort of flush in terms of what they've got in their bank. They may be willing to take a certain amount for certain fights, but Parker, I just don't think they'll be willing to stump up the sort of money that some of these guys will be wanting. I mean, Junior Farr and his team was sort of saying $1 million and that sort of thing. Your Dennis Lyhan says, any update on Oscar Rivas eye surgery boxing squared? Well, he had... it wasn't eye surgery, it was elbow surgery. So his eye issues, from what I understand, were resolved, quite some time ago. But he had surgery recently on an elbow injury, his left one, I believe. And Adam, he's actually just sort of clarifying some of that too there. Joe DC says Rivas will be fed to Anderson or Agaba at some point. I still think that they believe that Oscar Rivas has, got, some good years in terms of contention. I would think that he's be a decent contender for the next few years at least. I think they will have that fight with Carlos Takam, see where his sort of level is at, and probably pitch him into a tough fight if they can. Who that's against, is hard to say. Lawrence Williams says, I can see FA versus a guy like Alexander Flores next for his first top-ranked fight. Yeah, it could be something around that level. Some of the guys that he has faced, like Mikhail Wallish, Ali Aaron Demirezhin, Iago Kaladze, those sorts of names that he's already fought, it's probably going to be a sort of similar level to those sorts of guys. And I think Flores definitely falls into that camp. Marcus says, any news of Ortiz's next fight? Well, his trainer Herman Caicedo, he actually said about a week or so ago it would be in November, but that was as far as the update went. So Will Magic Man says, smash that like button. Yes, please. John says, good morning, Boxing Squared. Just joining now from the UK. How are you today? Yeah, I'm pretty good actually. It was, working and doing other bits and pieces, and just got back from a walk not too long ago. So 45 in the building at the moment. So thank you for joining another Boxing Squared live stream. I've actually sort of been going, for me at least, live stream crazy recently. I think this must be about my fourth one in the past week or so. So yeah, no, I've been enjoying it. And I was mentioning in another stream, I'm starting a new job. I do contract work. So that's starting from Monday. So there might be an adjustment period where, I might be a bit smashed in terms of, tiredness and that sort of stuff. So the live streams, it is effectively just a little bit of prep, a few notes, that sort of stuff, and just, go for it, have a blat and get on the mic. So could be a bit more of these live streams coming. So David says, Parker versus winner of Triple D versus Joyce as final eliminator in 2021 for WBO mandatory. Yeah, I could see Parker and Dubois, or Parker or Joyce, if Joyce beats Dubois, being an final eliminator next year. I mean, Dubois is going to be, if he keeps winning, that's the route he's going to get a sort of title shot in, or hope to get a title shot. Crypto Chaos says, Billy Nelson said Kuzman pulled out due to his father being really unwell, and Eddie Hearn had said that too, apparently cancer. So Lawrence Williams says, Marcus, announcement on Saturday, my guess is Helenius. Oh, for Luis Ortiz. Yeah, that's, if it's not going to be Helenius, it could be Charles Martin, Gerald Washington. There's only one of a small pool of names, because it will be an in-house fight, is my guess. And Helenius, for the time being, because PBC has an option on his next fight. So Helenius, maybe he will end up having a rematch with Adam Kovnatsky. But yeah, I don't mind Helenius versus Ortiz. And that's probably going to... I would be picking Luis Ortiz in that fight, just in terms of being able to outbox Robert Helenius. But, Helenius, as he showed in that fight with Adam Kovnatsky, he catches up with you. You get hit, you stay hit, and you stay hurt. So, you might be able to see Helenius take Luis Ortiz out. But my first sort of inkling is that Luis Ortiz would outbox Helenius. If they fought. That is if they fought. That's not announced. That's just Lawrence saying that would be his pick. So Solid Mid-Packer says Sanchez should smash up Ortiz. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see who he ends up going in with next, because I wouldn't mind seeing him in with a number of guys at PBC. He's been working with the PBC stable. He really danced rings around Joey DeWeco and looked good in that fight, but it's time for him to have a step up. He's in that awkward period of his career, much like Martin Bacoli, where you're a risk. A lot of guys don't want to face you. There's not a lot of upside in terms of, their profile, the money, that sort of thing. So it'll be interesting to see how Sanchez is progressed. Allegedly just 26 years old. Double A Boxing and Blunt says Fury and AJ are a long way from agreeing terms. They've agreed 50-50, but the TV networks may be the stumbling block. I'm sure if that fight ends up happening, it's going to generate a huge amount of money, and they'll find a will in a way. So your Dennis says, I see Fabio Wardley versus Jared Anderson for a vacant belt in the future cross-promotional fight, Wardley versus Anderson. That would have to be some time away, I'd imagine, at this point. Kamal says, do you think Wallin can stop Kaufman? I'm sort of picking no. I think it'll end up being a points decision. I mean, Luis Ortiz dropped Kaufman a number of times and stopped him in the final round. But I don't, one of the things with Otto Wallin is he doesn't carry a huge degree of power. He's not a big puncher. He's more of a, relies on his technical ability, and he's a bit of a finesse fighter. I mean, that fight with Tyson Fury, it looked a certain way because Fury got cut open by Wallin early on, so it ended up being a much different fight to it probably otherwise would have been. But I could see Otto Wallin going in there and using movement and just racking up rounds, the back of the jab, and just really picking his shots. Yeah, it's going to be a comfortable decision. I wouldn't expect that Kaufman is going to cause Wallin too many problems. So that was one of the topics that I had on my list. So we've sort of covered that one off. I'll just where else are we here? Dave Allen, he was defending his resume, that post this week, basically saying I get a lot of stick, but actually I've beaten a number of decent guys in or around domestic level, plus the Lucas Brown win. And, I think he's got a point, but I think a lot of people, the expectations that if he's going to be on some of the cards and get the profile and some of the opportunities that he's had, that people expect that he's at least going to take it seriously and train, and not sort of admit afterwards, well, I didn't really, my heart wasn't really in it, I didn't train. Certainly very up and very down, Dave Allen. And for a guy that's built a resume, and at the same time, it's disproportionate to his presence in the media and on social media. He's done well for himself, considering, and he's probably got better paid than a lot of other boxers who've had more skill and ability, and probably better wins too. Getting back to the chat here, UK Boxing Rob says he's surprised Hunter's thrown his name into the hat for Frampton, who's looking for an opponent. Yeah, it is one of these things, and I've just been mulling over some of the situation with Michael Hunter, which I was looking to turn into a video for as part of another video for Patreon. But there is a slight whiff of desperation about sort of throwing his name in, for any fighter. Remembering he did that for Dave Allen just a few weeks ago, and that came off a certain way. It's kind of like, really, you're sort of putting your hand up for that. Put his name in the hat for the Bacoli fight, and then a day later has basically sort of said, and this was another topic on my list, which it's good we're getting things ticked off the list here. He basically said, and actually I'll bring up the tweets because I had them ready, prepared earlier. Rematch only if it takes place in Kananga province in Congo, where he is a prince at, and then that was in response to Martin Bacoli telling him to stop talking crap, and that he absolutely, this is Bacoli, wanted the rematch. I like that fight. At a couple of weeks' notice with the quarantining and other bits and pieces, doing contracts, and it just would seemingly, there's not enough time to get him on that card. But I like the idea of that fight. I think both have gotten better since their first fight in 2018. I'd want to see it. And there was another tweet here where he said November bounty, so indicating that potentially he's going to be fighting in November. But in terms of, he's been saying a lot of heavyweights names and offering himself up, but it kind of feels like with all the things that he's putting out there, even though it's sort of feeding into that whole narrative of he's willing to stick his hand up for anything, there's also, for me at least, a bit of a whiff of I'll take anything and everything, because there's nothing at the moment for him. Where were we here? So Adam says he believes Rivas is a 9 to 11 ranked heavyweight. Last time I did my top 15, which was a number of months ago, I had him inside the top 15. I can't exactly remember where, but I think he's a top 15 fighter at this point in his career. Just having a drink here. So Scott70 has joined the building. Welcome. Tactical Bacon says, cheers mate, really want to see Usyk have a real test at heavyweight. I think we all do. There's questions for me now. I was originally quite bullish on Usyk about, what he would be able to achieve in the heavyweight division. But, a couple of years where he's been injury prone, has barely fought. I need to see that fight against Chisora, which is, Chisora, a guy inside the top 20. I know some people believe that he's top 10, but he's a tough night's work for anyone. And if Usyk can come through that and look good, then I think a lot of people will sort of go, okay, he can do something here. But if he labours and struggles or even loses, I think people will be quick to sort of off or at least write him down. Ruben Guerrero says, would love to see Parker versus Michael Hunter. Yeah, that's a good fight. I mean, there's a number of guys that you can sort of go, kind of like Frank Sanchez, actually. I mean, it's a sort of similar sort of fight. Guys that can sort of, come in and out, got good right hands, decent skills. I think that that would also be another close fight. But I don't see, if it's a fight outside of Parker's contract in New Zealand, I don't see Duco boss David Higgins stumping up the money for it. Just don't. I think they want to do it probably as more of a tick-over sort of tune-up, but sell it as a, this is the best of a bad situation. Any heavyweight can knock out any heavyweight. You can guarantee that's going to be coming. Solid Mid-Packer says, with FA with Top Rank, what's a likely matchup for him in the future? Well, I mentioned earlier, I think there's going to be a bit more of the same for a time. He's had guys, and that is Iago. It's with an I, not an L, as a lot of people have been sort of saying at Largo. It's actually Iago Kaladze. Also, Mikhail Wallace, he fought Ali Aaron Demirezhian. I thought those were good tests, right fights at the right time, because clearly he's raw developing. He needs that sort of test where it's, the guy in front of him is going to be punching back, and it does have some ambition, but it's totally beatable at the same time. And I think that we're going to see more of that, maybe for another 3, 4, 5 fights. I think it's evident that he's got some things to work on. But that's a nice segue into my next topic, which obviously with Top Rank now, you train at K Karoma. But it was interesting that Ronnie Shields going on the Boxing Voice and saying that, he was the one that cut ties with Agaba, and that was after Agaba signed with Jay Prince. And as I sort of said in my heavyweight news mashup video, some of the details around that certainly a bit more acrimonious than maybe we first thought. But he said, as soon as that happened and he was going to leave Shelley Finkel, that's when he sort of said nah, and he hung up on F.A. Agaba on the phone when they spoke. So yeah, it's, if you haven't listened to that interview, it's very revealing. And yeah, Shields, as I sort of said in that video that I did, not worked up and expressive. I mean, I don't mind the move. I mean, I think at PBC they were sort of guiding him, with the fights that he'd had. They were actually appropriate tests and good fights for him at the time. And those fights, it wasn't above his level. So he was able to, sort of get through, in the Demirezhian one, it was a good test, went the distance, a couple of thousand punches collectively thrown. But he won that one on the cards, and it was relatively conclusive, but he was pushed. In the Kaladze fight, he got a bit sloppy, got dropped. He's learnt a valuable lesson from that, but a lot of people have been quick to write him off. I think, give him a couple more years. He's still developing. I don't think people should be writing him off at all. He just might take a bit longer than some of these other guys to sort of fully mature. And even then, I mean, he may not become a champion. He just may be a really solid fighter in the heavyweight division. Not all of these prospects that start off with hype end up sort of panning out to be champions. They might just be good top 20 or top 10 or top 30 guys, whatever the case may be. Jordanis says, will the WBA make Robert Helenius mandatory for Joshua WBA belt boxing squared? I wouldn't have thought so. I mean, it seems the fact that originally that fight with Kovnatsky was an eliminator. I think if Kovnatsky won, he was probably starting to get lined up to be a mandatory for Joshua. But then when Helenius got the upset, all of a sudden the outcome from that win was he was given the gold title. So he's a champion in his own right in the WBA. So they're going to just end up feeding him to one of the, well, not feeding him, but matching him with one of the PBC guys that's between 3 and 7 in the ranking. So it's like Ortiz, Ruiz, Charles Martin, Chris Areola, and yeah, there's between 3 and 7, there's 5 PBC heavyweights in the WBA rankings. Adam Fahey says Helenius could well stop Ortiz if he lands. Yeah, I mean, it's not out of the realms of possibility. I mean, we've seen it with Deontay Wilder. And if Robert Helenius doesn't have injury and, in particular hand issues, the guy can crack. Ortiz versus Helenius would be a good fight, says Marcus, a good fight for both. I agree with that. I think there's, something on the line there with Helenius's gold title, as it were, and probably it would end up being some sort of eliminator as well. Marcus says there were rumors a few years ago that Ortiz was going to fight Mike Perez, but then they probably realized there was no money in that fight. I mean, those things unfortunately do matter. Nathan says he wouldn't mind seeing Wallin and Helenius, providing he comes through Kaufman next week, which I think he will. It'll be interesting to see with Otto Wallin and the other broader stable that is at Salita Promotions. So Wallin's not a PBC fighter, but he's fighting on Showtime, as Salita's fighters often do. So, yeah, I mean, being that sort of mid-tier promoter, he contributes to cards, not necessarily always putting them on, but I haven't seen anything to suggest that he's been able to pull the trigger on a big fight for any of his guys so far. I think Salita probably needs to start matching up some of his guys like Otto Wallin, Jermaine Franklin, Abdi Dovtaev, and there's a couple more too. There's also Gunnar Kolbein Christensen. He may end up being an opponent for one of those three because he's, I think, a cut below, like a Franklin, Wallin, and Dovtaev, who, Dovtaev is still meant to face Lucas Brown, whenever that's going to be scheduled for. Nathan says he thinks the Agaba may start with a fight with the likes of Bogdan Dinu, Rydell Booker type, and then within a couple of fights, maybe Jennings or Takam. I mean, maybe a Jerry Forrest as well, that sort of level. Or I could totally see maybe Victor Bisbal. He's been a guy that they've fed to a couple of guys within the top-ranked stable. It's a very winnable fight too. Jennings and Takam, I think maybe a couple of fights might be a bit optimistic. I think with his development, they just might sort of push those types of fight out a year or two. So Assembly Code says Wallin and Helenius would be huge in Finland and Sweden after all. It'd be interesting. I mean, I guess Robert Helenius, he has to get through his next fight, whoever that's going to be against, whichever PBC fighter he's matched with. But if because they PBC have an option on that next fight, the world is sort of his oyster in terms of the what next if he gets through that. And maybe he could end up being an A-sided and some sort of pay-per-view in Scandinavia or something like that. Adam says the WBA need to sort out this gold title. The gold champion is the mandatory, so be it. Yeah, I mean, they've been very sort of elusive when they've been pressed about, well, what did that eliminator actually mean? And because there were a number of people, and you can probably think of some of the usual clickbait merchants on YouTube who declared Robert Helenius the mandatory to Anthony Joshua. And I was saying at the time, hang on, it's the WBA, it was an upset, what are they going to actually do? Because I thought it'd probably just end up in another sort of eliminator. But then they gave him the gold championship, and they're probably just going to keep Helenius out of the way. They probably know that that's not a fight that, Eddie Hearn and Anthony Joshua and about 95% of fans would want to see. No offense to Helenius, but that's not the fight that fans would want. But if Helenius is pitched in with some sort of eliminator or final eliminator, and it's a guy like Charles Martin or Luis Ortiz or something like that, I could sort of feel, oh yeah, he's earned his way there if he beats those guys after also having that Kovnarski win. So Get the Smoke says, peace everyone. Ruben says, feel for Michael Hunter, good fighter, but not a name in the States for promoters to invest in him, and now dropped by Matchroom. Yeah, he feels like he's in a no man's land, and I know that there was optimism immediately after the split a few weeks back that he'd get picked up and the phone was ringing. But you also have to consider at this current time, it's not a good time to be dropped from your contract. I mean, he is at a certain level in the heavyweight division, arguably somewhere in or around the top 10, the back end or just outside. he's got a certain expectation about what he wants to get out of his fights in terms of the monetary value. But also, he doesn't want to take sort of chump change, and he doesn't want to jump into anything for short money, which, at the moment with the pandemic, it could be a different paradigm. Some promoters with shows are probably going to, you may see, and I think we've already seen it, there's a number of good cards that have either, the odd good card, I don't want to say too many, that have already happened, but it might be a main event and there's nothing on the undercard, and we'll see more of that, and it's trying to keep the cost down. So, and this is part of the video that I'm going to be talking about on Patreon. Guys like Hunter may find themselves in a no man's land because they're in that mid-tier in terms of the money. Get the Smoke says, any news on Char versus Ruiz? All we know really is what Char has put out in the media, calling him out, but also saying his promoter is going to the States next week, and while he's there, he hopes to have some talks about that fight. But as I was saying earlier on, I could totally see a situation where it ends up being Ruiz versus Arreola. That's an eliminated to Char's belt. So Ruiz could end up facing Char off the back of an Arreola win. Could happen like that. Front of the queue, we'll have to see. I personally think Char will end up pricing himself out, because the guy wants ridiculous money to sell his belt. Adam says, wouldn't mind Hunter versus Gassiev. That'd be a good fight. God of War says, it's been quiet around Luis Ortiz. Who's he fighting next? Unclear. His trainer, Herman Caicedo, was on The Boxing Voice about a week ago, and he was fighting in November. And Adam says, announcing this week. Just have a sip of water just a sec. So Nathan says, Gassiev has been inactive for too long. At this rate, he'll need 2 or 3 tune-up fights before he fights a top fighter. Yeah, it's a strange situation. It's almost like the curse of the cruiserweights, with him and Usyk coming up and effectively really sort of doing not much. Fish says, Fabio versus Parker. You mean Fabio Wardley versus Joseph Parker or someone else? I would see a Joseph Parker and Fabio Wardley fight happening in the next sort of 2 or 3 years. Wardley's just at a different level. He's still got to progress and evolve. God of War says he hopes it's someone with a name this time. That must be for Ortiz. I'm starting to get behind in the chat, so apologies here. UK Boxing Rob says Hunter also mentioned Wardley. Yeah, that's one of those sort of things that, if anyone is sort of saying Wardley's ready for that, I don't agree. He needs more seasoning. Sure, he's got a lot of talent, and Simon Vallely is at a certain level. It's a step up for Fabio Wardley, but he's not ready for that guys that are sort of, operating in or around top 10 or top 15 level. He can say, anyone, like White, anyone who wants it can get it, but they mean at a certain point. He might have a couple of defenses of his English title, and then he'll step it up to try to fight for the British title, and then maybe keep, just stepping it up from there. And Adam says Parker flattens Fabio at this point. Yeah, I think he would win that one at this point. Fabio Wardley's not ready for that. Jody says Parker Hunter is a fight I've been after for ages. Yeah, I like that. I think a lot of people like that. Geez, I'm really getting behind in the chat here. I'll just try to just get down a few comments here. Jody C says a Jagba is looking to work on head movement. Yep, certainly needs to. Udena says Tony Yoka versus Bryant Jennings after Johan Dorper. The arc that Yoka's been on with some of the opponents, and I think that's not a bad fight. And Jennings coming to the end of his career, he's already been fed to a prospect like Joe Joyce. I think Yoka probably does have the skill and talent. He's ready for that fight. Okay, I'm just going to scroll down the chat here just a little bit. I'm getting far too behind. Otherwise, I end up answering comments like from 15 minutes ago. It doesn't sort of reflect what's happening sort of in the chat at the time. Lawrence says, did you see that Lovejoy is training with Buddy McGirt now? It seems like he will finally make his US debut. I hadn't seen that, but I know that originally Lovejoy just a few weeks ago was thinking about Malik Scott, but yeah, Buddy McGirt, that's a good option. It's seemingly he's going to have this fight with Trevor Bryan. We'll have to see. Nathan says, who would you like to see Frank assist? Anyone with a pulse. A step up from Joey DeWeco. He's clearly ready for tougher tests. Adam says, why not make Frank Sanchez versus Dominic Breazeale? Yeah, I like that fight. That'd be quite good. I mean, it's sort of, at this point in his career, Dominic Breazeale's on the downslide, Frank Sanchez is on the upswing. I think that would make some sense. You know, decent matchmaker. I'd be picking Frank Sanchez to win that and looks everything with his face and his body. So, you know, Frank Sanchez could look really good in that one. So Creases says, hey there, Boxing Squared. Hello to you too. So Robbie says, does anyone else feel like Martin Bakole has been unfairly forgotten about after the Hunter loss? I feel like he'd been in the mix with Joyce and Dubois if he never took that loss. Well, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, it was a step-up fight. It was a good fight at the time. Bakole was favoured heading into it, but, you know, things didn't work out. I mean, that's boxing. He's actually had a very good comeback. But I think fans, it's not he's been unfairly forgotten. I think it's more a lot of fans have just forgotten about him. He's been beaten a lot of decent, you know, durable journeymen on his way back up. You know, you think Marius Vuk, Rodney Hernandez, Kevin Johnson, Yutalo Pereira. Those are some of the, you know, most durable heavyweights in terms of the journeyman stock in the entire heavyweight division in the world. So, you know, he's beaten some good guys in terms of getting a little bit of action rounds, and he's looked good for the most part. I mean, he really did a number on Marius Vuk. But I do think that he needs to have better expectations about the matchmaking. And that's why it's a shame that the Kuzman fight has fallen over, because that was the test that he needed at this point. Well, maybe not even the test, maybe that's the wrong word, but it was that step to get to the next fight on the way up. So Declan says, is it just me that finds it annoying everyone questioning the intentions, ridiculing Frank Warren for trying to make some actual decent 50-50 fights? Who cares if it's because they're struggling? Well, I think a lot of people, I mean, there's always going to be a degree of people that are going to be skeptical and laugh at Frank Warren and come up with theories galore and say that his business is about to fall over. But I think you can do a bit of both and hope for the best fights, but it also, I mean, I don't think it's unfair to ask the question, why now? Because if you really wanted all these 50-50 fights, you could have done that years ago, or at least in the pandemic period where nothing was happening for 3 or 4 months in terms of fights. You could have said it then and tried to get things going. So the timing, because remembering they were running separate events, comeback events, none of this was on the horizon. Then you have a coordinated campaign, all of a sudden, you know, appealing for the big UK landscape. I don't think it's unfair for people to ask, well, what's happened to, you know, bring this out? Why now? So Nathan says Hunter is a solid fighter in good fights regardless. Fish says, okay, I'm sort of getting off topic here. Declan says he's sick of people becoming fans of promoters rather than fighters. Yeah, I mean, I find it strange when people are fanboying for promoters. I mean, I watch boxing across the spectrum, and who's promoting it doesn't really matter to me. It's more about the matchups and the fighters. But yeah, it's weird fanboying for promoters. It's never made sense to me. You know, I just think we should be here for the right reasons, which is we like boxing, we want to watch boxing, and we're fans of the sport. And I think, you know, when there is good and healthy for the sport, you see purses going up and more TV dates and more exposure for the sport. And, you know, if the sport can grow after it's been sort of contracting and declining for decades, I mean, I think we should, I like the idea of what Frank Warren is saying, and I get what you're saying about people shouldn't criticize that sort of thing, and they should want it. Because obviously the health of the sport right now, I mean, I think we're seeing, you know, boxing is missing a trick. I'm sort of rambling now and going sort of all over the place, but yeah, I mean, UFC coming back with good cards, boxing's been putting on, and this Matchroom card that's happening just in a number of hours, it's pretty weak. But I guess with what's happening at the moment, it is going to be a bit hit. I do sort of think if boxing continues to put on, weak-ish cards. Maybe there's a decent main event, but nothing on the undercard. It'll just see the sport continue to decline, and perhaps some of what's happening in the ratings from BT or whatever are sort of forcing Frank Warren's hand, but that might be a good thing for the sport, if we do get some of these fights that wouldn't have otherwise gotten made. I mean, I just want to see the fights. At the end of the day, the money that the fighters get paid and the other sort of politics, sort of, if we get the fights, all that sort of stuff, it's forgotten about. But too often there's too much of it that prohibits it. And Frank Warren's been a big part of the problem too, as has Eddie Hearn, in terms of them both not working together. I mean, they probably want to see the other out of business, but I mean, we'll see where it goes. I mean, I'm not holding my breath at this point. So your Dennis says, I love your channel. It's been a year since I subscribed. Time flies so fast. Well, thank you for the continued support. Actually, the channel was just recently, I think I mentioned this the other day, just turned 3 just a little while ago. And I was actually just in the car on the way home earlier, and I was listening to Del Boy's Boxing News, which is renamed a year or so ago to Blue Collar Sports TV. So he's just hit 3,000 subscribers. So yeah, if you haven't followed his channel, please do so. He's got a great channel, good prediction videos, and just, he's a guy that just loves the sport. Adam says he wouldn't mind Gorman versus Price. Yeah, that's a decent fight, but will we see it? I mean, I don't know if there's enough money to get Price interested in it. I'll just get back to my list here. See the chat sort of all over the place. With fight this week, Zan Kosobutsky versus Kamil Sokolowski. That was in Minsk. It was an LCS promoted card called Cold War's Battle 4. And it was quite interesting because Kosobutsky never really got out of first gear, showed flashes of his potential, heavy hands, dropped Sokolowski in the 4th or 5th round, I can't remember which, stopped him in the final round, turned it up a bit, but yeah, felt like he could have done more. And it was interesting because Sokolowski's trainer, Gavin Lane, actually came to the channel and said that Sokolowski deserved more respect than he was given in the video. And I responded to him and I was respectful back, but the thing was, Sokolowski moved the whole fight, didn't throw a lot of punches, and Kosobutsky was in control the whole time, won every round. I mean, my post-fight review mirrored the action and went into some, probably could have got him out of there earlier if he put his foot on the gas. So I don't know how I was disrespectful to Kamil Sokolowski, but, he is a credit to the sport. But at the same time, because he also, Gavin Lane also said he needed to be given more respect because he took the fight at 3 weeks' notice and had no sparring. But if you took the fight at short notice, well, that's on you. And if the preparation wasn't ideal, well, it's not the opponent's fault. So, I just kind of thought, yeah, okay. But yeah, so Zan Kosobutsky moves on, goes to 14-0. So just looking at the chat here. PBC schedule is solid for sure, says Nathan. Well, the stuff they've announced for Showtime, I think out of, was it 10 cards? I think there must have been about 6 or 7 that I thought, yeah, those are really solid main events. And the couple of pay-per-view cards like that Charlo one, there's some decent fights on there, and some fights still to be announced on in terms of filling up those undercards. But I'm interested for the heavyweights about what's going to be announced for Fox, because Robert Helenius, who we know has got a fight still left on PBC after his Adam Kovnatsky win. Adam Kovnatsky, Charles Martin, Gerald Washington, Dominic Brazil. These guys are going to be fighting on Fox in the coming months. It's just a matter of the matchups, and most of them probably will be in-house fights. So it'll be interesting to see what they're actually going to sort of throw out there. So Joe DC says, what do you think about Haney wanting a piece of Gamboa? Was it the piece of his torn Achilles that was recently, operated on? Yeah, I thought Gamboa looked shot to pieces. when he last fought. Didn't look good. Robbie Mitchell says, Ivan Daichko, check him out if you haven't already. He's a bad dude. Ivan Daichko, he's a guy that I've been following closely for quite a while now, so I'm pretty familiar with him. I'm not sure if that was directed at me or others, but yeah, he's really missed opportunities. You know, he's a guy, double Olympic medalist from 2012, 2016, got a bronze at each games, and it's really been failure to launch in the pros. 6'9", Kazakh, good skills, you know, really talented and decorated amateur, but hasn't really fired a shot in the pros yet. And some of that comes down to either management or promotional issues. He just hasn't been put into fights where he needed to be way busier than he's been pro since 2017. He's like 7 fights deep. It's not a good situation. He's a guy that's just dropped off the map. I think last year I had him inside my top 10 heavyweight prospects, but because of the inactivity, in one of those fights that he had after that first video, he was fighting a guy who was it 49 years old or something like that. Yeah, so I had to drop him all the way back to I think 15th this year, and I only included him pretty much on the talent that it's clear to see that he's got, and obviously you can't teach height. A guy with his skills, who's proven over time that he is a good fighter, especially in the amateurs more so. Yeah, he's got a lot to offer the heavyweight division, but he's just sort of withering on the vine to some extent. So God of War says the only really interesting announced heavyweight fights are Dubois, Joyce, and White Povetkin right now. Yeah, there's not a lot that's actually sort of coming up in the next few months, but hopefully in the next few days we're going to have some of the PBC Fox schedule, so we'll get a bit of a steer on what's happening and when then. Yeah, it sort of seems the top guys, for the most part, they're waiting on crowds, and they're just sort of seeing how things pan out. It's a weird time, it really is, with the pandemic. It's going to be hard to plan anything. So Joe DC says weak move from Haney in his opinion. Yeah, Gamboa, I think he shot to pieces and didn't look good in that Tank Davis fight, but Davis didn't look good for that was a weird fight. Just looking at my list here, I think we've pretty much covered everything. We've got a couple of things. So Johan Pablo Hernandez, he's sort of coming out of a 6-year retirement of sorts. He's facing Kevin Johnson. This is that's on August I want to say the 22nd. So he's coming up, having been a cruiserweight. Good skills, he had a couple of wins of Steve Cunningham. I was about to say Kevin Cunningham, but I knew that didn't sound right. But yeah, obviously a question about his chin. And another thing that I had on my list was Jarrell Miller. Still suspended. His suspension has been carried over. Full hearing on this, and what is actually the sort of the science in terms of the reports, and what is the actual case here. I'm interested in that. Apart from that, didn't have too much else on my list that we haven't already covered. So if there's any sort of final thoughts, we're almost an hour into it. I always think that, we must be 15, 20 minutes, half an hour, and look up, and it's way further along than I thought. So we'll just a few more thoughts and comments. If you've got anything you want to get off your chest, speak now or forever hold your peace, or at least until the next live stream. So Creaser says, God of War, you're absolutely right. Yoka versus Duopa is a fight I've been waiting for a long time, so there is that also. Yeah, I think that's one of those cases that is, I think that's a hardcore that it's not going to get a lot of casual fans interested, but because of the French angle, it's a natural passing of the torch type fight. It's one that was always expected to be made, maybe could have happened a year or so ago, but yeah, I like that one, and I think Yoka's going to, impress in that one. Force Ghost Fabio says, thanks to your channel, I'm now following heavyweight prospects. Well, I hope that the information is informative. I mean, I know that a lot of the some of the prospects and the coverage that I do on this channel, it's not going to be everyone's cup of tea, because it's a bit more sort of niche into the, it's not even dropping down to the second or third tier type guys. Some of these guys, they're, a number of years away from being contenders, but they've, I've either followed them from pro or they've got my attention in some way, and that I'm now following them. So yeah, I'd like to try to have a bit of a broad brush of coverage on here, because if I just did the same 5 or 10 fighters, day after day, week after week, that would do my absolute head in. And sometimes I'll get comments like on videos where, and a good example might be at the level of Azan Kosubutski versus Kamil Sokolowski, which was this week. People will say, why are you bothering to cover this fight? And, when I see those sort of comments, I just think, man, they don't even understand what I'm doing on this channel. It's not just going to be, Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury, Dillian White, Deontay Wilder. That's not what this channel is about. I'm covering stuff at all levels of the heavyweight division, across the spectrum. And it's because I'm like most of you here who are, listening to the live stream. You love the heavyweight division. You want to see these fights. And, it can be a bit hard following some of these prospects that are a bit more sort of obscure, but some of these guys do pan out and pay off, and seeing their rises, when you followed a fighter for some time, it's really interesting to see the burn up in a screaming heap, and you never see them again. They sort of fade into obscurity, and then you have people coming out of nowhere. There's always stories evolving in the heavyweight division, good, bad, and indifferent. Robbie Mitchell says Dubois versus Joyce predictions. It's not going to be easy, but I've got Dubois stopping Joyce mid to late rounds. Well, I'm leaning towards Dubois winning that fight. I think that, admitted, he's got to be better defensively, but he is largely what he is. But I expect he will be moving a bit more. But I think he's going to eat a lot of shots in that fight, probably some good ones to the body too. Croesus says, who do you think Yoka will fight, or should he fight if he wins against Duopa? Well, it depends when he can get to the United States, because he's sort of stuck in France at the moment. But, if he goes to the States, he'll probably be given a soft touch first up, maybe some sort of like Victor Bisbal or something like that. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see that. Or, there could end up being Devin Vargas. Yeah, maybe something of that level. Luis says, salute, bro. Great content. Thank you for that. Jody says, bro, you're a mainstay in my box. Everyone that's here that, watches the videos, week in, week out, month after month, I really appreciate it. And, it's some of the stuff, I know it's not going to appeal broadly beyond a certain level of fan that, most people that come to my prospects coming up and the lesser known guys, I know that they're the true hardcore boxing fans, that you want to sort of be following these guys in their careers, because it's not just about 2 or 3 guys at the top. Boxing's much broader than that. And yeah, I love the stories and stuff that evolve over time. And I think we can even sort of see with guys like, Yoka and F.A. Ajagba, and they're just a couple of the sort of bigger name prospects that have come through in recent years. I mean, it's been a bit topsy-turvy for them, and either in the ring or out of the ring in terms of Yoka's case. It's, there's never a dull moment. Joe says, is Joseph Parker at least a year away from another title shot? Yeah, at least, probably longer. If he gets another title shot, it's probably going to have to be through a mandatory shot. And he is well placed in the WBO, but he's going to probably have to go through an eliminator. Benjo says, is Maris Bradis fighting at heavyweight yet? I think he'll be a danger. Had him beating Usyk on my card. Well, he's sort of gone between back and forth. I mean, remember, he absolutely iced Manuel Cha. He put him into next week. And this is why I sort of say for an Andy Ruiz Jr. fight, Ruiz is just going to absolutely maul and steamroll Manuel Cha and end up getting a highlight knockout. But we're an hour 4 into the stream. It's gone past 11:15 here in New Zealand where I am. And it always surprises me too. I get so many people coming to the channel thinking It's all over the world, actually. So, Australia and the UK are the most common, but they get some pretty random sort of, are you from this country? Yeah, it blows my mind. I think I've got a New Zealand accent, but, to me it's just talking, so I don't really hear it. But, yeah, if you know what I mean. But I'll wrap it up there. But thank you for joining the stream once again. I think this is my 4th one in about a week or so. So yeah, we'll try to keep up the pace in the next couple of months. As I was saying, there might be some more lives along the way. Got a new job, so I don't know how much energy I'll have. Information overload, and it might be just a bit taxing. But yeah, so the lives are a good way to sort of get in, get some stuff out, but also get your interaction and your thoughts and feedback on what's happening across the division, because as I say, it's always changing. Okay, what do you make of it all? I'm not going to say that, but thank you for joining, one and all, wherever you are in the world, morning, noon, or night. Really starting to get tired now.